FLX1.com. This is Inside the FLX. I'm Josh Durso, and today on the show, we are talking with one of the candidates running for Phelps Town Supervisor. Earlier this year, Ryan Davis received backing of Democrats in Phelps to run for that position, which has been held by Supervisor Norm Teed for a number of years. Ryan is here in the studio with us. Thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Josh. Good to be with you.
So let's talk about the beginning here. When you were sort of mulling over the idea of running for town supervisor, what were some of the thoughts that were going through your head as prevailing ideas of why it was the right time to do it?
It's funny, I've been asked a couple of times about, what leads you to that. And I guess for me anyway, I think, representing people is part of who I am. It's kind of the fiber of who I am. I got that bug a long time ago. I remember the first time I was able to meet a politician. Actually, my father and mother brought me to Mike Nozzolio's Columbus Day fundraiser at Club 86. And, I met with the senator, said good morning to then Assemblyman Craig Doran, and I just thought they were the two coolest guys I think I've ever met. And, listening to them speak with people about their issues and different solutions and things that they could do for them. I think I was in seventh grade, and I'm like, wow, this sounds great. So my first public office actually was my senior class president. So that's when I got to represent the 94 other graduates of Mid-Lakes that year, and that was the start. And then working, and when I went to college, I got to work twice for Senator Nozzolio, once right here in Seneca Falls and once in Albany. So you kind of get the bug, you learn to, you see what representing people looks like. When I first worked for Mike, I was at the district office, and I had to take all of his constituent files, which were in paper, and move them to floppy disk. And those are two things that kids listening don't understand what I just said. No. But I got to see how he approached every person that reached out to that office. And, some of it was just as simple as, your team won sectionals, so here's a letter and congratulations. And then there was other ones with, small business owner wanted to know why the state had this law or this law, and, how he went about answering those questions and getting to a resolution. So that led me to wanting to serve my area, and that's how I ended up running for school board. And so I think the idea of representing people from Phelps is something that was just kind of part of me for a long time anyway. I've been doing school board now I'm in the beginning of my 9th year, so it was kind of a natural leap after having a conversation with, of course, my wife and my 2 kids, because running for town supervisor is a little bit different than running for school board, and definitely different than running for senior class president. So I had to get their buy-in, but it was just kind of a natural.
I'm curious because it's, especially with the way things have been for the last year and a half to 2 years with the pandemic, serving on a school board is no easy task, right, by any means. What made you sort of say, all right, I've done this, I'm ready for a new challenge? What was it that sort of made you say to yourself, I want to sort of help on the bigger scale instead of just the school community, I want to help the entire community? Yeah,
well, this is, like I said, the beginning of my 9th year. And when I first ran, I spoke with a longtime board member from Mid-Lakes and one of my old coaches, Bobby Dorgan, and he said, 9 years, Ryan, and you got to get out. and I kind of see why. You need a fresh face in there. Yeah. There's been a lot of things that we've started on the school board that I'm very, very proud of, and I'm glad that we're seeing them grow. to move on to town government, local government. When I first announced, I said that I thought that there was a need for greater transparency in our local government, and I think that's something that you guys hit on quite a bit. I think that there needs to be an engagement from our local government officials with our organizations in Phelps, and if you're talking about any local government. And I think if you put those two things together, you start to paint a picture for a future of the town that you live in. So one of the things that we do at the school board level is, well, we post we're on YouTube now for all of our meetings, which wasn't the way we did it pre-pandemic. But now that we do it that way, we found that there's a greater level of engagement. So we get more information from the public that we serve, and I think that makes us a better decision-making body. Now, the decisions aren't always popular, but we hear all sides of it. So we're a little bit more grounded in what the public wants. So I think that level of transparency has been very, very good for us. I think it's something that is needed in Phelps, so more people can be involved in the decision-making process, and those that make the decisions have more accountability to the people that they're representing.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, transparency has been a staple in your campaign so far, but I'm curious, what have been the issues that you're hearing from constituents who maybe are just frustrated by more mundane, less exciting things in the town of Phelps? What are some of those hallmark issues that you keep hearing about over and over again?
Well, actually, honestly, the transparency one is one that I didn't invent. That was some of the things, the original conversations I had with different people when I was first making the decision to run. They said that, that's where the genesis of all of it is. It's, whether you're talking about how we pay for to redo our town hall, or any of the number of other issues. It's how do we do it? Where is that decision coming from? Where is the money coming from? Where are my tax dollars being spent? How are we getting from beginning to end? So I think that part of it, the transparency part of it, was always kind of the underlying factor in every decision that's made, or any decision that's made. And again, it's an engagement thing. I've been around, I've lived in Phelps my entire life, and I've been involved with a number of different organizations, whether it be the Legion or community theater, or I coach basketball for the Y, I've coached for the PCC. So you get to talk to a lot of different people and get the information from a lot of different people that aren't tied together by anything other than they live 3 streets away. So you get that information, and you start to understand what it is that they want out of their town government, and then you try to figure out a way to deliver it.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, and this is one of those things that comes up quite a bit whenever we have a conversation with an elected official, or even when we're just sort of debating this stuff. How do you fix the transparency issue within the community if people are either hesitant or they just don't participate in the public-facing portions of town government, meaning the 1 or 2 public meetings a month that people see and think, that's my town government? Yeah, town government is working the other 28 days, if you weren't aware. Right. So what do you think could be done to sort of help that along the other days, other than those where the meetings are happening?
Well, I think the first thing, like I said, on the board, we found once we started posting the meetings, first on Facebook and now on YouTube, the clicks on it weren't happening necessarily the night we were having the meeting. So people were viewing throughout the month, and the phone calls and the stops at the gas station and the emails weren't happening the night of the meeting. It was the week after, and when they finally got around to watching it, it's a lot like Hulu now. You don't have to watch Lego Masters the night it's on. You can sit down with the family the night that you're available, and you figure out how to watch it. So I think that's the first main one. If the technology isn't so difficult that it can't be done, and if you can't figure out immediately how to stream it while you're doing it, at least tape it and post it so people can go back and see what was actually said rather than reading, meeting minutes. And I've been involved in my local union in the school board and everything else. So meeting minutes are something that necessary, obviously, but it doesn't actually capture what's being said and done. I think the best way to capture it is to actually see what's being said and done.
It's interesting. I'm laughing over here because you say that, and I've been yelling and screaming about this for what feels like an eternity, even though it's only been a few months. Look, when it comes to that in-depth engagement, I think when people hear that you want to get the community more involved in town government, they're going to be somewhat leaning towards judging whether that's successful or not based on how many people show up to meetings.
Right.
So when it comes to that, what would be an effective plan in your estimation for kind of keeping people in the loop who aren't there, and then also letting the rest of the community know that people are being heard from throughout the month?
Well, I think reporting that back out through the town website and is a natural first step. So somebody has a place to go to see. And in social media, you can do a pretty good job with putting information out, and it's easy. Everybody's carrying a phone. Most people are on some sort of social media, so they'll be able to see it. I think that's the base layer of how do you get it back out there. I think another thing that we should do in Phelps, and it's as much of a community as we have, it's shocking to me that it hasn't been done. I think that it would be nice if we, it doesn't have to be a regularly thing, yearly, if the town board, the two villages, the district were to get together and kind of speak to each other. This is what our plan is for this year, what we're trying to accomplish. How can I help you? How can you help me? What is the message that we're trying to put out? And how can we tie it all together? Because I think we do a really nice job in Phelps telling each other how great it is. I think what we miss is telling the world how great it is to live in Phelps. And I think that after you start to come out of the pandemic, what you're finding now is people don't have to drive to Rochester to go to work anymore. Their building's probably closed. Right. They can work from home. And we have two wonderful little villages that, you've got places to go and eat. You've got places to Hillary or to the wine bar or to Crafty's for a beer. Wouldn't you like to work from home a couple blocks away from that and be able to walk and enjoy the downtown? If you want to go into Clifton, it's a great little main street in Clifton. You can go to the talk of the town, get a coffee and a bagel, and then go back to work in your pajamas. Yeah. And I think the world's going to move there, and I think it would be wise for Phelps to move there early on, so people would come to Phelps to live.
And it sounds like a really smart idea, especially since next question I have is actually economic development tilted. Mm-hmm. Whenever we have
Friday, when the county planning board was talking about things that they need to address on a county level, and you read through it, and it was the age of the population in Ontario County, and the other things they talked about were Route 5 and 20, 332, 96, and 14, and I read that article, and I'm like, well, two of those four roads are Phelps. Yeah. So we have to engage at the county to find out what their long-range plan is and how we can best affect that. I think that anybody that lives in Phelps right now wants me to say that they give people more of a reason to want to come live in Phelps or just come through it. I think years ago when they were opening the visitor center at Seneca Lake, I think it was Hillary Clinton that said that this was the gateway to the Finger Lakes. Well, you got to get off the thruway in Phelps. Yeah. So I would argue that we're actually the gateway, and that 96-14 part has to be developed in a way that is attractive to, it's got to have curb appeal.
Mm-hmm. And now, I'm curious, and this is just a little bit of projection on my part here, but Aside from 332, I don't really see any of those corridors as being so significantly developed that they become the Jefferson Road example. Roll my eyes here. That the planning board decided to use as this terrible thing. Mm-hmm. I'm curious. Do you get concerned when you hear things like that about, the county potentially trying to affect essentially what is, the lifeblood of Phelps in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think, it shouldn't be a sky is falling conversation. Do I think that Route 96 or 14 would ever be developed to the point, like you said, in Henrietta? I'm guessing probably not. And besides, if somebody like me was to try to get elected with the idea of that's what is the end goal, well, nobody would vote for me. So I don't think it's a concern. That you have to be mindful of what people's needs are and what their limitation is to develop to meet those needs. And I think that's how you attack it in a local government and a county government setting. But to say that Route 96 is going to be Jefferson Road probably isn't going to happen.
And that is something that happened over the course of about 50 years too. So there's also
sure.
that. So let's talk about this rural community, and this is the question that I'd like to throw to every person running for office or even who is already elected in a rural community. There is a sustainability question, especially over the long term when you look at the 10, 20-year outlook. Mm-hmm. There are questions about how viable some communities are. And obviously Phelps has a lot going for it, but what do you see as some of the big picture issues that probably need to at least be talked about, maybe not worked out in the next 2 to 4 years, but at least a conversation started on them so that over the 5 to 15 year range, solutions can be had?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to have a discussion with both villages, and this is part of the reason why I want to bring everybody together too. Is there's a housing need all over the Finger Lakes, so you have to figure out where those houses are going to go, so you still feel as though you're in a small town, because part of the great. One of the great things about living in Phelps is you've got neighbors where I live all around me, but they're not on top of me either. Right. And if you develop in a place like Phelps, you want to make sure that whatever that street looks like with those houses on it, it still has that feel to it. But we definitely need a place. We need places for people to call home. In Phelps, I mean, we still get a number of people that want to come to and send their kid to Mid Lakes, but don't necessarily live there because there's no place to find a house. Right. So that would be part of the conversation, and you have to start to look at that with a long view rather than how am I budgeting for this year. You start to build this year's budget and next year's budget and next year's budget with the idea in mind that your long-term plan is to add whatever that X number of houses is to this area to provide the need.
I'm curious because you mentioned it, the housing issue, obviously the current crazy real estate market aside. Mm-hmm. When you think about the kinds of development that we've seen over the last, say, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, particularly in Ontario County, skewing more towards a lot of rental developments and that sort of thing, as opposed to housing developments or places, affordable housing, whatever the case may be. What kind of balance needs to be struck there as far as trying to figure out what is good for Phelps versus what might be good for Phelps in the very short term, but maybe a little problematic in the longer?
Well, the rental idea, we have apartment rentals right in the village right now, and nobody says boo about it.
Right.
My buddy and his family have owned, I think it's a 5 or 6 unit apartment right on Main Street. Mm-hmm. So the idea that it's something that can't happen isn't necessarily true, because it's been happening for a long, long time. So yeah, of course you have to strike a balance, but young families also need a place to start too. So I think there's a way to strike that balance, and you wouldn't have all the reasons why people would be afraid of it. It wouldn't be something that was reality. Kind of like 96 wouldn't become Jefferson Road.
Of course. My last question for you here. When you think about your experience, whether it be professionally or with the school board or with the union or whatever the case may be, what are a couple of the examples that you think back to or that had a really big impact on getting you here today and to this point where you are now ready to lead the entire community forward?
Yeah, a couple different things when it comes to school board. The impact, the first time I won, it was something that I was interested in, and those that know me knew I was interested in it. But I wasn't sure that the timing was right. So I have a good friend of mine that worked at the school reached out to me and said, I think you should do it. And of course I said, I don't know if, kids were young, not exactly sure. And then they sent Mrs. Gilman, my third grade teacher, at me and said, Ryan, you have a lot of ideas, and I think you would be good for it. And of course I said, Mrs. Gilman, I don't think I'm quite ready yet. And she said, Ryan, I think you ought to do it. And I said, yeah, I'm not sure. She said, no, Ryan, I really think you ought to do it. And of course I said, okay, I can't say no to her 3 times, so I will. Called my friend back and said, I need help getting the petitions ready and everything else. She said, they're already filled out. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, we knew you were never going to say no to Mrs. Gilman, so we already went through and filled them out. So that type of people think that I can do this and want me to succeed in doing this is impactful. It was then and it is now. I've had the opportunity as local union president to represent a couple hundred working families throughout the Finger Lakes, and I sit on their trustees. So I make decisions that affect them now with the general fund, but also with the health care for their family and in their retirement. So I'm helping make decisions that are going to impact people for their entire lives. So that's not lost on me. And I want to rise to that challenge, whether it be talking about a local school board issue, union issue, or now in town government.
All right, Ryan, appreciate the time. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. We will be back next Monday, live at 11 a.m. In the meantime, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Inside the Finger Lakes is a production of FingerLakes1.com digital media. The show is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to shows like this one. It's hosted by me, Josh Durso, and if you want to hear archived episodes, visit InsideTheFLX.com. If you have an idea for a show, email it to josh@fingerlakes1.com or follow me on Twitter @FLXJosh, where we keep the conversation going all week long. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you back here next week.